Welcome to the Grow Podcast. I'm Pastor Mike with New Hope Network. We're here to help you take your next step in your relationship with Jesus. I'm so glad you're with us today. Well, welcome, New Hope family. This is Pastor Mike. I know David Lundeen is our normal host, and he's not able to be with us this week. So I have a couple of guests with us. Hattie Carrier, who is our director of the discipleship journey. Is that the title?
Yeah.
Like
close enough.
I'm like David. We just make up titles around here. And even though I'm kind of the guy in charge of those, I guess, I don't know how that works. And Pastor Kylie Score happens to be my wife. She's also the Williston campus pastor. And this is kind of interesting. You're in between the two of us.
I don't know. Well, I do know how I feel about it. I don't like it. I feel like you guys are going to start arguing or asking me tough questions.
Wow, you've got a lot of faith in our marriage there.
Bantering. Maybe.
Yeah. We had the right person in the middle if we did start arguing.
What you didn't see is just before we started is we suggested that she could be a marriage mediator, and she was ready. She was ready to go. So I think she probably has a list of things she wants to see fixed in our marriage.
No.
But welcome, if I did not say it already, to episode 38. We're in the middle of a series right now we're calling My Story Matters. And what we're doing on the weekends is we're walking through the Gospels and looking at just one-on-one encounters or one-on 2 or 3 encounters that Jesus had with people and talking about how those encounters change them and consequently how an encounter with Jesus changes us. And this last weekend, anybody remember who we talked about this last weekend? This is quiz time.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I know.
One of the disciples early on.
Should we just start working our way through?
Andrew, you got it. Andrew, whose brother?
Yeah, right.
1 point for you.
Oh, my goodness.
What was the question?
Whose brother was Andrew?
Oh, Peter.
Peter.
Or
yeah.
Pete, as
Pete.
some people referred him to.
We called the message, I'm just Pete's brother. And if you get a chance, go back and listen to that. But one of the main point of what we talked about this last weekend was when Andrew met Jesus, one of his responses, and it's just a natural response for him, he wanted other people to meet Jesus. And Andrew's life, at least the life that we have recorded in Scripture, not a whole lot in Scripture about Andrew, was about him constantly inviting and bringing other people to Jesus. So we thought on this episode of the Grow Podcast that we would talk about what it looks like to invite people to meet Jesus without it being weird.
Okay.
Because we've all seen that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
have you guys ever seen, maybe this is a horrible question to ask because it might embarrass somebody or call somebody else, but have you ever seen someone trying to invite people to Jesus and it was just weird?
I've actually been invited to see Jesus and gone, wait, I kind of forgot the fact that actually I do follow Jesus, but right now I don't even really want to admit that because this is such a weird encounter that I just want to get out of it as fast as I possibly can.
No.
Yeah. In a grocery store, some random stranger, I had no idea, and it was very awkward.
There's some of those instances that are just kind of awkward. I've had people hand me like tracts, TRACTS. We don't use those much anymore.
I've been guilty of using those before in college.
And I think in certain cultures, in a certain time, it's worked. Anymore, because people have kind of misused them. But where they're kind of the bait and switch. It's like, how to get $1 million, and you go, oh no, kind of thing.
Yeah. Or the ones that look like money, but they aren't.
That's the worst, where someone
I have never seen those. That sounds so
they
bad.
had them that looked like a $50 bill, and people would leave those as tips. So can you imagine the waiter or waitress go up and they would pull it up? It's a big tip, and they flip it over. And here's how you know Jesus. Now, if you've been part of that, this isn't to make all of us feel guilty or weirded out. I think there was a time when some of that was very effective. And there are some uses certainly still for that was very effective. But introducing people to Jesus is so relational and needs to be so relational. But it does feel kind of weird at times, doesn't it? So here's a question I want to start out, because I'm glad we've got the two of you here. So we're gonna talk about this today. We talked about how powerful inviting people to Jesus is over the weekend, and yet the truth is so many of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, and I know pastors, I've been this way at times, just feel a little hesitant with it, and something holds us back. I'm curious why you think that is, whether it's from personal experience or from talking to others. What do you think holds us back?
I think when I think about it, like sometimes still like my palms get sweaty. Like, oh no.
So you get nervous.
Yeah, like I have to like say big words and remember stuff that I probably should share with them, but I don't remember what that's supposed to be. So I get nervous.
So is the nervousness not wanting to screw it up, wanting to get it right?
Yeah, yeah.
What's the nervousness?
I think it's, wanting to say the right things. And then also like one of my fears is they're going to ask a question that I don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I'm not an aggressive walk up to somebody I don't know kind of personality anyway. And I think it's always fear of, am I going to be that weird, pushy person? Because I don't want to be weird and pushy. I mean, I think this is a great thing, and I think it would be great for them to be there. But I don't want to be like that weird, aggressive, pushy person where they're thinking, okay, strange lady, what? Yeah, sure. Let me just get back to my shopping.
Where does this idea and this image come from? Because so many of us fall into this, that I call it cold call evangelism. We're supposed to just walk up to people that we don't know and say, hey, do you know Jesus? If you don't, you're going to hell. And that's what scares us away. Where do we get that from?
That's a good question, because I think I feel we all feel that pressure of just like, that you're supposed to share with strangers.
Yeah, well, I think actually it has probably been a number of years since I've had those, but old habits die hard. Being older, that kind of was the curriculum of when you talk about sharing your faith. They didn't usually say, hey, it's having these conversations with people that you have relationships with. You weren't supposed to say, I don't know the answer to that. And I know for me, there was almost kind of this thing around it that it wasn't about who are you wired to be and what fits naturally within your personality. It was almost like this is the right way to do it and this is the wrong way to do it. And if the right way to do it, I mean, I'm a type A person, and so it's like, oh, if I miss step 1, 2, or 3, somebody's going to go to hell because I didn't do the right way to do it. And in reality, that pressure, then it's just like, well, I'm just not going to do that if I can't do it right. Right.
Isn't it interesting how little we've changed in 2,000 years? Because the Pharisees and the Sadducees with Jesus, one of the things they're so upset about is there's a list. There's certain things that you do, and there is a right way and a wrong way, and if you do it outside this box, it's not even that, they would call it sin. It's just it's like a template that you have to do, and we still get caught up in that in the church. So here's what I want to do for the next few minutes is talk about a couple of things. One, how do we get past the hesitancy? How do we get past it? And then give us just some beginning kinds of understanding of how to introduce someone to Jesus without it being weird. And we're going to try and pack it all in. If we go too long, we'll just split this into 2 podcasts, and we'll have 2 weeks worth or 2 podcasts worth. So here's the first thing and just as I've been thinking about it, studying this and looking at scripture and from 30 years of pastoring, is to get past the hesitation. I think one of the big things we've got to do up front is know the why. Know the why. And I think there's 2 sides to this. Know, first of all, why it doesn't feel natural. It's part of what we just did. And then know why it's urgent. And we just talked a little bit about the hesitation, but why doesn't this feel natural? Because it doesn't sometimes, does it? It feels forced. What are your thoughts on that? And I know some of both of you have cheated and looked ahead of my notes a little bit.
I feel like if I say the answer,
go
I'm
ahead.
a cheater.
That's okay. That's okay.
Right.
Well, I think, there's just that if this is God's design for how we are to share with other people, I think sin gets in the way of that, of like saying, you're not going to do it right, you're not going to say the right words, that person's going to think you're a really weird person. So all of those things they block us from sharing because we live in a sinful world.
Well, yeah, and it was just in my head and went away. Just kind of on a note of that, something that probably is something I've done more recently. If there is something that feels like an awkward thing, I'm realizing if you embrace the awkwardness, sometimes it makes it less. Like I've had some conversations with people that could potentially be awkward, and I'm learning to say, they're not stupid, I'm not stupid. Saying, hey, I don't want to be that weird person, but I just have a question, or I just think this is great. And I know this could be like one of those weird moments. Disregard if you want to disregard. But I just think this would be great, and I appreciate it. Or following that up with, you're just one of those people that kind of lights up the room. And I don't know, I feel this weird. I like it when you're the cashier there when I come through, and hey, we've got this coming up. That might be kind of weird. Up to you.
And I think, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. I think one of the things to get past the weirdness is you just do it.
Right.
It's like learning a new skill, learning something. I wish our producer Michael was in the room, because I'm going to out him here, but he's learning to tap dance.
Right.
And I can't imagine the first few times. I really hope he listens to this. This will be fun. And he will, because he edits it. But first few times learning to, it's just got to feel weird. But the more you do it, it feels normal.
I wish we could play a clip of him tap dancing as part of the podcast.
That would be good.
That would be awesome.
He dances great now, but
And Colossians answers the question a little bit, and back to what you said, Hattie, it says, once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds. And part of what that's talking about is the definition of sin is dismissing God's design. And the whole purpose of sin is to make what's not God's design normal and God's design abnormal. So because we've lived in this sin-filled world for all of our lives, and it's been around for centuries and millennia, God's design feels abnormal. It absolutely does. And I think the other part of that is to realize we have a very real enemy who wants to take everything out from under God's leadership. And the last thing he wants is for us to introduce other people to Jesus. And so he's going to do his best to introduce thoughts and ideas and justify our fears and all these kinds of things. First Peter describes him as a lion roaring, and there's all kinds of ways we can talk about that. But basically, he's doing his best to distract us from what's important.
And that's going to be first priority within that, because of the importance and the power of that.
I'm going to move us on to the other, because we need to know why it feels abnormal. And the reason it feels abnormal is just what we talked about. But I think another way to begin to get past the hesitancy on this is to know the why it matters. And here's part of the deal with this. We talk about this as followers of Jesus, but it tends to produce more guilt than urgency.
Right.
Hell is real. Heaven is real. If you aren't sharing your faith with someone, they're going to miss heaven. They're going to go to hell. And we start, getting all scared. I don't want to screw it up, and all of this. But I think what we miss in the why is Jesus is involving us. And if he trusts us, it probably means we aren't big enough to screw it up.
That's good.
Right.
But I think we do need to understand that there's an urgency for this. Paul talks about in Romans. How can people hear if no one's telling them? How can they understand if no one helps them understand? So I think the why for us is make sure we understand why, but part of that is understand what we're doing. We're just introducing people. Okay. Have you ever, here's the next question. Have you ever tried to introduce two people that you're friends with, but they don't know each other? Or tried to set up two friends, a guy and the girl, is like, oh, I want to set them up. They would be a really good couple.
I love setting people up.
You love Has it always gone well?
Not always. No.
Yeah. But how's that feel? I mean, is your job to make them get along?
No. I mean, all I can really do is introduce them, say the good things about them and hope for the best.
Yeah, and you do your best to set the setting, right?
Yeah,
right.
It's like, well, I'm not going to, set them up while we're driving, or introduce them while we're driving by the sewer plant or something.
Drop them off and say, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck, you guys.
Yeah. And that's all we're doing.
Right.
That's how we're doing. So we need to keep that in mind.
That takes the pressure off a ton when
really
you think
does.
about it that way. Instead of I have to share this long, lengthy thing to, and if I don't do it the right way, then they're going to go to hell. But when you think of it that way, a
and
lot
all
less
we're
pressure.
doing is introducing people. And so part of that, introduce people, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Kylie, you introduce people the way that who you are.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So think about, here's the next question for us. And for those of you joining us on whatever platform you're joining us from, think about this. As you read in the Bible, different people who introduce people to Jesus, what different ways, personalities do you see? And you don't have to get super specific, but specific.
Well, like Paul is a polar opposite to any way that I would do. Like the way he handled everything, including introductions, but the way he handled conflict and the way he handled issues and situations, direct, in your face, to the point. Here's the deal. This is my opinion. But, even if it's just my opinion, I really think this is the best opinion.
Right.
It's right.
He was very bold.
He's one of those guys who had an answer for everything.
Yes.
And you just go, I can't do that.
Yeah. He definitely would have been, like I said, polar opposite to mine. But,
of course, we talked about Andrew this weekend. Andrew's was what?
Inviting.
I just want you to meet Jesus. You just got to meet Jesus.
I love that. I've never looked at the story in that way of him bringing the food. That's so good.
Well, and you look at, and we talked about this week, and not only bring his brother Peter, who became the first real leader of the church. He was the one who brought the loaves and the fishes to Jesus. He was the one who brought the first Gentiles to meet Jesus, the first Greeks. I mean, and that crossed a major cultural line. Anybody else you can think of? Of course, Paul is intellectual, reasoned, kind of that apologetic. He'll talk to a stranger, anybody.
And knew his way around all of the arguments from every angle.
But part of that is how many years did he go to our equivalent of college?
Yeah. He went to seminary and then some. So,
The first week in this series, we talked about another one of the disciples. Okay, quiz time.
That was the quiz I know I'm going to fail.
Probably me too, but
Matthew, you got it. What did Matthew do?
For you.
He threw a party. He was the party guy.
Some of us we love parties. I'm thinking of a person we have on staff, Olivia. Every time we turn around, she's coming up with an excuse for a party.
True.
This last week for St. Patrick's Day, all of a sudden she's like, we've all got green drinks and we've all got green food and stuff, and she's throwing a party.
Definitely her gift.
That's her gift, and to introduce people to Jesus, just to put them around other people who know Jesus. And there's a great book by a guy by the name of Mark Middleberg. I don't have it here. I've got another book by him here called Building a Contagious Church, but his book is from the 90s, so it's an older book called Becoming a Contagious Christian. But he talks about the different styles and just knowing who you are. But we've got a lot of conversation about that these days, like the Enneagram. You guys take an Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs. Do you know your numbers and all those kinds of things? I won't put you on the spot to figure out what it is, because it depends on the disc things.
A few of the letters.
And I know some people love those, some people hate those, but it's a valuable tool just to help you know who you are.
Right.
So when you look at, he identifies like 6 different ones. So I'm going to list these, and then you figure out kind of which one you lean towards, all right? So he talks about a confrontational type, and that would be, Peter was kind of confrontational. He talks about intellectual. That would have been more Paul, have a reason for it. He talks about a testimonial. Here's my story. It's like the blind man in John chapter 9. I don't know all the reasons for everything. All I know is I was blind, now I can see, Relational is Matthew. I'm just going to get a bunch of people together and hopefully you get to know Jesus. Invitational, this is the Samaritan woman. She's like, you've got to come and see the man who told me everything. I don't have every answer, so I'm just going to invite you to come and see. Or a person who serves. Acts chapter 9 talks about a lady by the name of Dorcas. It's
a really unfortunate name.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dorcas.
It kind of is. But phenomenal servant. Phenomenal servant. And and I've known people down through the years who, because of their service, people go, if that's who Jesus is.
I think of Rose. Someone we served, our friend Rose Postel, who we served on staff with. And it's just something that's just so natural to her.
Just oozes out of her.
And she's just so giving and so serving that you can't help but just all your defenses go down, and you're like, wow, I want to see what matters to you, because just with who she
I
is.
love the list that you just shared, because as you were sharing some of those first disciples, I'm like, that's not me. Intellectual, like, nope, that's definitely not me. Confrontational. But the relational one, like, that's definitely how I share with other people. And so to see that God put different examples in the Bible so we can connect that and know that, just we're all different and we all have different ways to share, that's really good.
I think a combination of relational and testimonial. Because I've noticed, like, some of those moments, it kind of surprises me sometimes, where my chance to be able to share my faith and tell my story a lot of times comes from invitation, but it's because I've done things with people, and so there's that relational base. And then usually where it comes out is not tell me about Jesus, but it's your family's different than my family. Why does your family handle these things better? And why does your family function the way it does? Kind of what's your secret? And they knew I was a Christian. I don't try and hide it. I am who I am. And so then you're not cramming down their throat. It's, well, you asked me the question. So this is what makes me different. And but you already have that relationship built, like I say.
Right.
So
You've earned the credibility.
kind of a combination of the two.
So let me list those again. And for those of you who are joining us on whatever platform you're joining us from, if you can, write them down, or just think which one most describes you. So confrontational, which, that puts some of us off, but that's a style.
Right.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
and certain people, that's what they want. Intellectual, testimonial, relational, invitational. I just noticed all these are O's except the last one, serve. I don't think we can go serval.
Yeah, I don't think that's a word.
Yeah, that didn't
That's a
work.
cat.
Confrontational,
Serval.
intellectual, testimonial, relational, invitational, or serve.
Which one's yours, Pastor Mike?
I love invitational. I love inviting people, but I will tend to. You've been married to me for 27 years. Where am I?
Ooh.
What popped into my head was intellectual.
Okay.
Because I've known
Yeah.
of multiple situations where there are people who have some pretty high, very intellectual doubts and things that they need questions about, and multiple people I can think of that it's a relational. I mean, there's a relationship first, but that intellectual conversation of being able to meet them. Sharing those arguments.
Think about this. Some of this comes out of your own experience. So for me, in college, I dealt with strong doubts. And so I actually have done and have continued to over the years a lot of research into proof, the proofs and apologetics. And you think Easter is just around the corner. And one of the things for me that just settled it for me is the actual historical evidence for the resurrection is so much stronger than the evidence against it. But most people who reject it have never actually studied it. And I love preaching and teaching on that. So and every week we talk about some homework, and I would encourage you, we're going to give you a couple different pieces of homework this week. Just figure out which one is kind of most you. Not that you ignore the others.
Right.
Because I think there are times for that. So first one is just know who you are. Second thing, and really this should be the first thing in preparing for this, is pray for opportunity. Pray for opportunity. We tend to think of prayer as something we do, and yet Scripture talks about the fact that prayer is the primary way the work gets done, work of the kingdom gets done. And I'm relearning this these days, but if I am called to invite people and introduce people to Jesus, then God, help me. Ask me to see people with your eyes. Help me to my heart to break for them, and then help me to recognize opportunities.
That's really good.
Because if I'm not praying this way, sometimes I'll stand in line, in Walmart or wherever, and have a conversation with someone, and then after I leave, I'll go, "Oh, I think that was an opportunity." But I wasn't thinking
it's
that way.
It's not like fresh on your mind.
And so praying for that, praying to recognize that. I think the next thing is stop trying to be perfect before you introduce people to Jesus.
I was thinking about that as you shared earlier on. It's almost like a prideful thing. Like, I want to get it right, and I'm making sharing about me instead of about the other person, and them making the decision to follow Jesus. When I need to turn around, it's all about them, and it's not about me at all.
Yeah. And we wait till what? What if they ask a question that I don't have the answer to? Well, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And even though, I tend to lean towards the intellectual side, there's a lot of times people ask me a question, go, I have no idea. Or, I did a study on that once, but I can't remember. Let's study that together. There's a friend, and in fact, a great series of book called Organic Outreach for Ordinary People, Organic Outreach for a Church. His name is Kevin Harney. And he says, he talks about the fact that if we were to kind of put our introduction to Jesus passion as followers of Jesus on a scale of 1 to 10, that scale is going to change from one day to the next. And for some reason, we feel guilty that it's not always 9 and 10.
Yeah.
He said, and he's a high evangelism kind of person. He said, there are some days, if I'm real honest, I'll go, it's a 2. For one thing, I'm tired of being around people, and
it's very honest.
Right.
And then he said there are some days it's like 8 and 9. And so part of what he says, stop trying to be perfect, is just every day try to move yourself 1 point higher than where you are that day.
It's a very achievable goal.
Yeah.
When you think of going from 2 to 9, that's like, well, I need to
I can't do
get
that.
better. Yeah.
But today I'm a 2, and I certainly have those days. My day off after, especially the end of the week, where I've been with people all week long as an introvert. Kylie will tell you, I don't even want to be around myself some days, let alone her or anybody else. So it's like, okay, that's a -1. I wonder if I can get to a 0 today.
Right.
Something like that.
Well, and I think along that, we talked a little bit earlier about some of it is doing that and actually practicing that. I think a principle that's kind of been leaking into some other areas. I have a fear of heights. I really hate heights.
Yes, you do.
A big fear of heights. And I've noticed if I avoid heights, it only gets stronger. If I push myself and do things
that's
that
probably
really...
not the way you want to say that around heights. If I push myself, I'm just saying. But go ahead.
If I ride the escalator on the 4th floor where it's really making me not happy about what I'm seeing, the next time I do that, I'm a little less freaked out. And the next time I get a little less freaked out. And I think that's part of with this, the more you practice and the more you do that, the more conversations you have and you realize, well, that one didn't go the way I wanted it to go, but nobody died and we're all still okay. And I learned a couple of things. So, I think some of it, the more you do that, the less anxiety you have in those things.
Let me throw out one last thought that you probably haven't thought of before. And I'm a former small groups director of discipleship, and so I know how your heart beats. But this is so important: is invite other followers of Jesus into your journey and talk about sharing your faith, and ask them to hold you accountable. We're doing something as a staff team here where it was your idea in the first place, Hattie.
Because I'm bad at this, so I wanted to get better.
We've set a team goal for us as a staff for Easter. Together we will invite, and we've set a number together. It's not a competition with one another. It's holding each other accountable and celebrating that. And if we hit or exceed that goal, we're going to celebrate that. And that's not to turn this into some mercenary thing. Right. That's part of it, just to encourage one another and cheer one another on.
And it's amazing when you do tell somebody about it. I mean, I always do the thing if I ask somebody to hold me accountable, where I know if I'm not going to ask somebody to, that means I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're out of time, and I want to give us just a little bit of homework. Normally it's David saying, okay, what's our homework today, Pastor Mike? But
Pastor Mike, what's our homework today?
There you go. We talked about one already. What was the first one?
Figure out what your style is.
Yeah, there you go. Figure out what your style is of the 6: confrontational, intellectual, testimony, relational, invitational, or serve. Second one is write down your why. In one sentence, can you write down why it's important, why the people you love would need to know Jesus, right? And write it down in a way that just feels natural to you. Write it down somewhere and keep it in front of you. So, well, thanks for joining us on the Grow Podcast, episode 38. Thank you, you two, for joining
Very
us.
fun.
This was, can I say it, much more fun than David.
I didn't have to do like interference.
You
Right.
did.
Good.
We actually kind of got
Right.
along
Yeah.
with that. And it's a lot of fun for us to have something different. Thank you for those of you that have joined us. Make sure if you haven't and you're a regular listener, you hit that like button, that subscribe button, the notification button, so that you get notified when it comes out and don't miss an episode. Sometimes we drop a surprise episode into the middle of a week, and you'll want to get that on whatever platform you join us from. And as we say every week, growth always begins with the next step. So your next step this week is to identify how you invite people, how you introduce people, and to write down your why. Have a great week. God bless.